All right, welcome everyone. I see a few more people are still trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We'd like to welcome Tom and Will Gattiker. They're here tonight to talk to us about their great adventure on the Idaho Wilderness Trail, and we'll devote most of the hour to the presentation. We'll do some question and answer afterwards. So if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. There are a few we might be able to answer throughout the webinar, and we can just do those in that same Q&A box. But the rest of them we'll save for the end, and Tom and Will can answer as much as they have time for. After the webinar, just a reminder, we will be sending out a link to the recording. So if you have friends who didn't make it or you want to share it with people afterwards, we'll send that out. And we'll also send links to resources like some information from Tom and Will and any other resources that we can share associated with the presentation. So again, thanks for joining us. And I'll let Tom take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to spend about an hour talking about the Idaho Wilderness Trail. This was something that was kind of cooked up by Mike Lanza and a few people over at Idaho Conservation League a little bit before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic hit, and, not a whole lot happened. A couple of years ago, Will told me he thought we ought to give this trip a try. So we did, and we're going to tell you all about it. But just to give you a little bit of background on the trail, it starts up at Wilderness Gateway on Highway 12, which is kind of the northern part of the Selway-Bitterroot, and it ends in Atlanta, Idaho, after about 296 miles. It only crosses 3 roads in that time, one of which is actually paved. You hit the Selway-Bitterroot Wilderness, Frank Church River No Return Wilderness, and the Sawtooth Wilderness. And the trail travels a good bit of some of Idaho's premier rivers, the Selway, the Salmon, and the Boise. The idea of the trail was to create a long trail that really showcased some of those premier areas like the Selway River, the Bighorn Crags, the Selway Crags, the really marquee parts of the Sawtooth and the Middle Fork. So we're going to overview the route in a little bit more detail for you, talk about a few of the logistical challenges and just a few personal highlights, and then we'll open it up for questions. So at this point, I'm just going to turn it over to Will, and Will's going to kind of walk us through the route.
Yeah, thanks, Dad. So like he was saying, this route starts out the way we did it, along Highway 12, along the Lochsaw River in northern Idaho. And pretty much as soon as you step off the pavement, you start climbing up into the sort of high mountains of the Selway, an area called the Selway Crags. And Dad, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So these mountains are really unique in Idaho. I'm from Boise. I'm used to recreating in like the Sawtooth, the Payette sort of area. And, this was just completely different. It was green, it was lush, all sorts of like ferns, and like stumbling across like these old growth groves of big cedars and stuff like that, just like babbling streams. It really reminded us more of something like we'd seen in like the Oregon Cascades or the Appalachians than something that we'd seen in Idaho anywhere. And it was just really remote, really rugged. We didn't see a single other person on the trail throughout this whole section. Just some really unique going. We'll talk about some of the challenges in a little more detail later, but the trail conditions up here are notoriously bad, and that made for a pretty rough introduction to the trail, but it was also super rewarding. And then, after you drop down out of the Selway Crags, you hit the Selway River there at Moose Creek. And then you're on the Selway River for about, I think, 30 miles or so. And that's just another really unique section. So this was just another really interesting part. We had to deal with a lot of smoke, as you can see within the photos, so that tamped down the views somewhat. But the Selway River is just stunning. I mean, I've done a lot of rafting, some kayaking, and like I'd never really been on a river quite like this. It's just, for most of it, just like very slow moving in these big, deep pools, but in this really stunning canyon, sort of in the blend between sort of like doesn't feel nearly as lush anymore. It's really interesting. It's a lot more deserty, sort of a lot more like southern Idaho. So you can sort of feel that sort of transition between climates already. And I think that's one really unique aspect of this trail as well. We dealt with getting rained on a lot here. We were getting soaked day after day after day. Spent a lot of time huddled around the campfire trying to dry out our socks and even sleeping bags sometime. But yeah, this is shot from one of my favorite camps along this section. Some river camp I can't remember the name of, but just being along that river, falling asleep to that day after day was just really, really nice. And then from there, at the far end of the Selway-Bitterroot Wilderness, you pop out on the Magruder Road, which is a sort of this lonely dirt road that splits the Selway from the Frank Church Wilderness. And then we hitched a ride on a brief road section there, and then we at the Paradise Workstation or something like that, we got back on the trail, and now we're in the Northern Frank Church. Next slide, Dad. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so Northern Frank is like another really, really interesting, really rugged area. I mean, nobody goes here. Like we saw a couple hunters on horseback, but if it hadn't been elk season, I feel confident we would not have seen a single human being. It was all burned, which was interesting, especially in the fall. We got like a lot of nice, just like reds and yellows and all that from all the shrubbery that was filling in where the pine trees had left behind. And just incredible relief. You start to go from sort of the like more sort of like low key, like rolling mountains of the Selway area to just like the huge, massive relief of the salmon area. And that was just stunning to see that change as well. And then at the end of that, we popped out on the Salmon River, and after seeing, about a dozen souls in I think about 12 days, we pop out on the salmon, and there's this big like 40-person rafting trip, and some of my buddies from Stanley are guiding it. Cool little moment. The Idaho Wilderness, definitely an area of extremes in a lot of ways. And then, so yeah, after traversing through the Northern Frank, and we were actually along the Selway River still in the Northern Frank Church, but you pop up over those mountains there, and then we hitched a ride again on that Salmon River Road to a trailhead called Panther Creek, and then started to climb up into the Bighorn Crags, which is an area I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with. A lot of you have probably gone. Yeah, and that, just exceeded all expectations again. Sort of going from more low-key mountains. Dad, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Sort of going from like the less sort of craggy mountains to these, just areas with like big, beautiful granite faces, granite spires, all that sort of good stuff. Here, we got our first sort of reminder that we were late season. I don't know if we said this yet, but we did this trip from about like early September to early October, which, as you know, you can start flirting with some pretty nasty weather up in the Idaho high country that time of year. And we got snowed on, we got sleeted on a good bit. I really regretted only bringing shorts on the trip at this moment. But yeah, we spent a couple days up here. It was a pretty short little jaunt, but saw some great wildlife too. It's a little hard to tell in that photo down at the bottom, but there was a mama black bear standing guard of that tree, and her little cub was scrambling up in the tree, and they just watched us go by, and we went our way and we let them go theirs. And then so from there, after climbing like 4,000 or 5,000 feet up into the Bighorn Crags, you can see here, this is me looking out over the Middle Fork River Canyon, as we're about to drop another 4,000 or 5,000 feet all the way down until you hit the Middle Fork of the Salmon River at the confluence with Big Creek. And here, the wilderness started to feel a lot more crowded. We were well past float season, the peak rafting season on that river, but still, we got to see the occasional floater, which was nice. Rafters really love to give you beer, which is something, I knew already, but, I was just like, every single group was like, oh my God, you've been out here for like how long? Like, oh, you probably haven't had like a single beer this whole time. Like, here, let me give you a couple, and repeat that like every single rafting group you see all the way up the river. It's pretty great.
Wasn't that many beers.
Well,
there's one.
We didn't have that many. But yeah, so the Middle Fork, obviously like an incredibly written about, incredibly photographed, incredibly floated. But I'd never seen it before. I don't think my dad had either. So this was a real treat, getting to experience that landscape. And as you can tell, when you're down sort of near the bottom of the canyon, near the confluence with the main salmon, you know, it's really deserty. It's almost, you know, it could be like the Boise foothills almost, you know, a lot of sagebrush, bunch grass, all that sort of stuff. And then as you head south, you know, you climb an elevation, you go back into that sort of forest, into that low sort of subalpine environment. So you had another sort of like transition from like one really beautiful part of the Idaho experience to another.
Some of this burn stuff here is the stuff that washed into the Middle Fork and has caused all the closures on the Middle Fork the past 2 years, just decimated and tore up all the soil. There's just another picture that I kind of liked at Marble Creek.
Yeah, beautiful shot photo. And then, of course, at the very end, the Sawtooth. You know, I'm sure probably everyone in this chat has been there at least once. So, you know, I won't spend too much time telling you what you already know about it, but you know, this kind of felt like a homecoming, I think, to me and my dad. You know, this is where we'd been backpacking for years and years and years and years, and to kind of experience a lot of these places that we knew and loved already, but also throughout that, you know, Mike had picked out for us through here, you know, took us through some places that we hadn't seen before that are our new favorites. And next slide, if you don't mind. And yeah, so we were into early October at this point. It was cold, cold, cold at night, but it was just incredibly clear. I mean, something about the fall, you know, just these pristine blue skies. I mean, you just felt like you could see like to the ends of the earth getting up on some of those high ridges. And you know, another benefit of doing it kind of this later in the season was these areas weren't as crowded. I mean, you're going places like Sawtooth Lake, you know, Barren Lakes that are pretty crowded, unfortunately, you know, throughout the summer. But yeah, some great wildlife and some just incredible views.
Yeah, we saw, I don't know, half a dozen people, maybe something like that. And we saw Jessie, the trail ranger, maybe half a dozen times. We kept leapfrogging her, but not counting all those times, maybe half a dozen. Just beautiful. And yeah, we made it.
Here we are at the power plant trailhead in Atlanta. You know, really looking forward to getting that burger.
Yeah, so I'll just touch on a couple of the logistical challenges, and Will's going to touch on trail conditions, which was not logistical, but was definitely the probably defining challenge of the trip. But resupply is a pretty big deal on this trip, because there, you know, a lot of through hikes you have town days. This hike you have no towns. You have no town days. Well, you have Stanley, but that's you know, 250 miles into the, you know, into the thing. So it creates some challenges. Although we did get Cheez-Its at one point, but we'll just kind of talk about some of those challenges and talk about what we did. So we start up at the north, and you can resupply here where in the Magruder corridor, that's about 70 miles in. You know, that'd be a pretty decent carry if you did that. And it's just a brutal drive to get in there to where the trail crosses the Magruder corridor, and it's not entirely clear where you would cache stuff there, although there is a kind of a guard station there. We actually were able to arrange a private drop. Some friends helped us out, but that, you know, it's not something that a lot of people are going to be able to do. So I kind of think of this as like the resupply crux. I mean, you start at Wilderness Gateway, and you've got to get at least to mile 70 to do that Magruder thing. Or the next logical point would be down at the Salmon River Lodge, mile 106. That would be, you know, a really tough carry as far as food goes. So there's some other options up in the you know, the upper part of the first 70 miles of the hike, like those I've got listed here. But I think to make this trail a reality, we need kind of a better resupply option, maybe at Moose Creek or something like that. And, you know, I don't know, maybe the Forest Service can contribute to making something like that happen. Salmon River Lodge was the next place that we resupplied at Corn Creek. That's on the main Salmon. That's about 100 miles in. We spent the night at the lodge, which was really great. They fed us great, let us do laundry and stuff like that. And we shipped a package to them in advance, and they had it. They drove it in and had it waiting there for us. So that worked out really great. So yeah, so far we have a private airdrop, and we have Salmon River Lodge. Those are the first two, and then we had a drop at mile 150 at the Flying Bee, which is a really popular waypoint on the Middle Fork of the Salmon. They flew in a package for us. They were really wonderful. And Tyrell there at the store was really great as well. There's a lot of options, as anybody that's been on the Middle Fork knows. There's a lot going on in the Middle Fork. Lots of air traffic in and out. You've also got the Loon Creek store, and so on. The one thing is here, we almost found out the hard way. There's 2 Flying Bees. So if you do this, make sure you send your stuff to the Flying Bee at Big Creek and talk to the Flying Bee people at Big Creek, not the other Flying Bee. That would have been a problem. And then Stanley, of course, is a natural, a natural resupply point. Well, I might as well leave that slide up because those are the people that helped us resupply at Stanley. Kim and Rachel, and they gave us some winter gear and lots of good food and things like that, and then we went on our way. They also dropped us off at the trailhead and picked us up in Atlanta, so they were really instrumental in making the whole trip happen for us.
And I think it's worth pointing out that my dad has a PhD in supply chain management and still found it very challenging to arrange all this. If that gives you any idea of the logistical challenge.
Yeah, PhD in supply chain management was no help whatsoever in this. Not kidding. Yeah, somebody asked about food. We actually freeze dried our own food. We have a freeze dryer, and that worked out pretty great. We also cold soak a lot of our lunches, which helps cut down on pack weight. And I would really recommend this book. I don't want to get into all the logistics, and freeze drying would be a whole nother conversation that maybe those of us who are interested in it could have, but kind of beyond our scope today. But we followed a lot of advice in Katie Gerber's book, which is a new book on through hiking. It had only been out for a couple months, I think, when we did the trip, and she has some different ideas about nutrition, which I would just recommend, if you're doing any kind of through hike, that you check out her book and think about some of her advice. It definitely worked for us. Basically more protein and more fat and fewer carbohydrates. The other thing that we kind of learned the hard way, I'll just share this, is never ever vacuum seal tortillas. If you vacuum seal tortillas, you just get one tortilla that's that thick, and yeah, not good. So I won't make that mistake again. Yeah, so fire was definitely an issue on this trip. We had a great fire season this past year in Idaho, but you probably remember the fire season the previous year was just brutal. I think when we left on September 9th, there were about 20 fires burning across the state. It was just nuts. And we honestly thought about calling the whole thing off. There's one fire that's the only fire that we actually saw, Huckleberry Ridge fire, but there was smoke and fire pretty much everywhere. So, just kind of quickly, what we did was we figured out who the fire officers were for all the fires that we would be going by. And there's basically 3 fire information officers. And we talked to all those people in advance, and we got their cell phone numbers, and they said that we could contact them if we needed to via text using our Garmin InReach on the trail. And if we needed, if things seemed like they were getting dicey, and that did happen once when we were on the Middle Fork, things started to kind of fill up with smoke, and there'd been some lightning the night before, and we were getting really concerned. And we texted the fire information officer, I guess for the Salmon Chalice National Forest, and she was great. She got right back to us, and she can see, I see what you're seeing on the satellites. It's way over in Horseshoe Bend or somewhere like that, so nothing to worry about. So that was a good strategy, because there's really only a couple of 3 or 4 maybe facilities in this entire hike where you can get internet and Wi-Fi. So it's just, you could be 5 days out, from the nearest place where you were able to make a phone call or use Wi-Fi, or more than that. And fire conditions can change very quickly. So it was really nice to be able to do that. We also had a front country monitor person, Tim Brewer, who just kind of monitored the fires on NCWeb for us. And he also let us know about a fire situation that he thought we needed to reroute around. And Will's going to talk a little bit more about that, actually. It was just an example of our kind of itinerary with fire information highlighted there. It's kind of like a fire scorecard. Yeah, so Will, why don't you talk about this issue with Parker Mountain area?
Yeah, so one fun sort of unexpected challenge that we had to deal with pretty urgently was we're in the middle of the Selway-Bitterroot Wilderness, and we get a message from our friend Tim Brewer saying like, "Hey guys, this fire." I was checking into how this fire popped up, like literally like 100 feet away from the trail that you're supposed to be on. So you can see that big red thing. That's the Horse Creek fire that popped up while we were already in the woods. And so luckily, we were at the Selway, or we were at a spot that we could access some internet, and we were able to, pull up trail conditions and basically find this big reroute around that fire. It still did take us pretty close to the fire, but it was downhill, so we felt a little bit about that. And we really did think about just calling the trip. At that point, we were pretty worried about this fire when we found out about it. Worried about how we were going to get out to like Hamilton, Montana and find our way home would have been a whole nother challenge. But, this alternate ended up being really cool. We saw a great part of the Northern Frank Church, and it dropped us into Horse Creek there. I marked on the map was just really unexpectedly beautiful, just this stunning canyon. And so, even when things are kind of going wrong out there, things just kind of worked out, and we always saw something really cool.
There are a few road sections. Don't want to spend a lot of time on this. We managed to get rides on all the road sections. They would be a challenge. I mean, they were a challenge, I guess. On the Magruder Road, we just basically made friends at the campground, and they gave us a ride, saved us quite a good bit of road walking. It wasn't really river permit season, so I think maybe during river permit season you'd probably have a little bit better time maybe catching a ride on that stretch. That wouldn't be too bad to hike. Salmon River Road stretch is a long stretch that would really be a bummer to try to hike. When we were there wasn't much weekday traffic. We actually contracted with the Corn Creek Lodge, same place where we stayed and resupplied, to just drive us on that road section. So that worked out pretty great. River permit season might be a little easier to get to hitch a ride. And then Highway 21 is the other road section that was, of course, is an easy hitch hike. That one's really not a problem, not a big deal. Oops. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about trail conditions, Will.
Yeah, so one of the sort of most unique things about the IWT, I think, compared to like most long trails, is that a lot of the trail conditions, especially in the Selway-Bitterroot and the Frank Church, were really, really, really bad. Sort of like nothing I'd ever seen before. Like it says up there, one day in the Selway-Bitterroot, it took us 11 hours to only go 7 miles. We were crawling, just bushwhacking through, just like, huge brush, and then you'd have to step over some big log. And then that left photo is in Horse Creek, that sort of detour I mentioned, where you're in this really beautiful canyon, the downside of which is the canyon is basically collapsed onto the trail from where I think it was dynamited out by miners. This trail was, it's just this beautiful trail that people have put so much work into, but now it's just in such an unusable state, which is really a shame. And we'd kind of been warned about this beforehand, and we thought we knew it. We thought we knew what to expect, but we just kind of got our butts handed to us on a lot of days. If you mind going to the next slide.
Yeah,
there.
definitely. Oops, wrong way. Sorry, Will.
Yeah, so tying into sort of that reroute that I told you about, like the fire, the IWT, especially like with the trail conditions, it's sort of variable, like which year, different trails get maintained. It's sort of variable, which year fires are going to pop up. And so like in some ways, I think that there might not ever be like an official like IWT that everyone does. I think that, different people are going to do different variations. And I think that's really cool. That you have this route that's sort of a little bit amorphous, and everyone's going to have a different experience.
Yeah, this is a trail picture here on the right. You just can't see the trail like a lot of places. We were just basically using GPS and just doing the best we could. So we had the fire reroute that was kind of spontaneous, and then before we even hit the trail, we had a reroute planned in the northern part of the hike, just because of contacts that we had told us that the actual route and the trail had basically been abandoned. So Mike couldn't join us today, but I don't know what Mike Lanza and Justin and those folks were thinking when when they added that part to the trail, but we decided to bypass that a little bit.
Yeah, this is just a map of what my dad was just talking about. So the section on the left that this is in the Selway-Bitterroot Wilderness, by the way, before you hit the Selway River. And you know, we've been warned about a section of that purple trail not existing. So I think literally as we were driving up there to the trailhead, you know, I was on my phone, sort of like planning an alternate around Guy, and I ended up coming up with that yellow, which we called sort of the Moose Creek alternate. You end up going out Rhoda Creek further, and then to Moose Creek, which was awesome. Like Rhoda Creek is just so beautiful through there, just this like stream that's just like going over all these like granite drops into big pools and these beautiful old grove or old growth cedar groves that were just stunning. But even in that, you know, the trail just didn't exist for a lot of it, which is a really cool surprise. It's a really nice surprise when you get in there and you're having to bushwhack for days at a time. But yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit where this ties in with the ITA, is hopefully we can do something about that.
Yes, so we'd like to see this happen. You know, we can do this. This state, the you know, the outdoor community in the state does amazing things. So many amazing things. And you know, you think about all the different states that have you know, through trails that hit their prime wilderness areas. We can talk a little bit more about the Idaho Centennial Trail and the differences between the Idaho Wilderness Trail and the Idaho Centennial Trail, but that really is in terms of the route, you know, the major difference is that the IWT is really wilderness centric, and it would be great to make that route a reality. We hiked it. You guys can hike it. It was hard, and you know, it was not something we felt confident about when we started, but you know, we did it. I'm sure most people on this webinar could do it, but it would be probably a whole lot better if the route were a little bit more established, and if the resupply options were a little bit better established as well.
Absolutely. But yeah, no matter what state it's in, I think, you know, everyone here should go do it. Like it took us, you know, about a month, which, you know, for a lot of people, that's a lot of time. But I think one of the beauties of this is that is a lot more doable than, you know, taking like, you know, 5 months to hike like the PCT or 3 months to hike the Idaho Centennial Trail, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mel and Kelly, do you want to chime in a little bit about some synergies with ITA's work?
Sure. Let's wait for my video to start up here. Yeah, thank you. And oops, I think I must have, there we go. I have to admit, the first time I had heard of the Idaho Wilderness Trail was when I can't remember if Tom reached out to us or we were talking to Mike just this past summer. And so I had to get on and look at the map, and it is pretty amazing. I mean, you can hike. We already know that Idaho is home to some of the best wilderness areas, the most contiguous, you know, the Frank Church being the largest contiguous wilderness in the lower 48. And to have this trail that gives you that, like they said, this cross section of, you know, from cedar groves to these amazing river canyons to high peaks and lakes to, you know, almost desert down low on the Middle Fork. It's pretty incredible. So we've been thinking a little bit more. I mean, we actually looked at the map initially and thought, oh, we've already worked on some of these, you know, sections of trail. We worked up from Wilderness Gateway. There are sections of the trail that overlap the Idaho Centennial Trail, which, you know, is an officially designated trail, state driven, and the Forest Service recognizes it, but it doesn't really come with any particular maintenance priority for the Forest Service, I think, over and above other heavily used trails. But, you know, they know about it. It's part of the vocabulary when we have conversations with our Forest Service partners throughout the year about different trail maintenance projects. You know, we say, well, we want to work on the ICT, and they know where that runs through their forest. So I think one of the, you know, the biggest things is just having the conversation about the Idaho Wilderness Trail with our Forest Service partners, and knowing that it's a route out there that people can follow. Whether you hike it in pieces or you decide to through hike it like Tom and Will did. If you like this idea, I think one way that the ITA and also our members and volunteers can help would be to contact your local Forest Service recreation. I shouldn't say local Forest Service. I should say the Forest Service sections where the trail travels through. So it takes a little bit of research, but like you can find a recreation contact on the Sawtooth National Recreation Area for the Sawtooth Wilderness. Of course, the Frank Church, there are several different Forest Service districts, but with a little bit of online sleuthing, and I'm sure Tom and Will could potentially help out, just a call or an email saying, hey, we saw this presentation. This looks super cool. We'd like to see some more attention or recognition given to the Idaho Wilderness Trail route. And so that's one thing that I think we can all do to help move this idea forward. And as far as ITA goes, something that we can do is we're planning on talking with Will and Tom and trying to figure out some different projects on the IWT route this next summer. I was taking notes as you were talking, as both of you were talking, and we do have a tentative project planned on Waterfall Creek, the lower section of Waterfall, this in the spring. Last year, like I said, we worked on some of that sections of that Selway Trail or the Locksaw Peak Trail where it leaves Wilderness Gateway. And then that Barren Lakes section, I think 2 years ago, we had a trip up there. And then this last fall, we had another trip, and that one headed up more towards Trail Lakes. But that Grand Jean area is just incredible, and so many opportunities just leaving that trailhead that I think that's a great opportunity for us too, to be able to do some projects out there. And then of course, the worst of the worst, the Rhoda Creek. It's pretty infamous on the ICT also. People talk about the ICT. Rhoda Creek comes up pretty quickly when someone asks, someone who's recently thru hiked it, what the most challenging section was. So definitely some sections that I think the Forest Service will need to weigh in on also, as far as what they think the best plan of attack is for some of these that will take pretty extensive work to get them back to, something that resembles a well-maintained trail. So yeah, I guess from ITA's perspective, we're trying to plan some projects. If anyone's interested in volunteering for a trail project who hasn't before, stay tuned. We'll put our project schedule out somewhere around March 1st, and we'll make a note if which trail projects are part of the Idaho Wilderness Trail route, just like we will for the Idaho Centennial Trail. So you can stay tuned there. Trying to think, Kelly, anything to add? We've got some question and answer.
Yeah, I'll point out we have our email addresses here. Will's got a blog, and I just have some random stuff on Google Drive that's publicly available that I think we've pasted into the chat. And then you can see the URL for Mike Lanza's blog, thebigoutside.com, and you can just search on, bigoutside.com, Idaho Wilderness Trail, and that'll take you to Mike's section on the Idaho Wilderness Trail as well. We'd love to see some people do it. We thought some folks maybe would give it a try this past hiking season, but nobody did. But folks can do this.
Oh man, it would have been a nice year to do it too. Like you said, the fire season was relatively mild for Idaho.
Definitely.
There were fires, but the air was pretty clear.
Yeah, do we have some questions?
We do. One is, how was the cell service out along the trail? Were there places where you either unexpectedly or expectedly had 3 bars or any way to get out with cell service?
No, honestly, except for Stanley, Idaho. The lodges now generally have like Wi-Fi cellular, I guess. So if you can make friends with somebody at a lodge, or again, like we stayed at a lodge, also the folks at Flying Bee, were very gracious, and some other folks, to let us use their Wi-Fi based calling. But you've got to get a password or whatever from them in order to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, the best advice would be to depend on that inReach device.
Yes.
For communication.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and not just the trails. I mean, even like the road sections, no cell service. So yeah, don't plan on getting on the campgrounds and finding a signal either, I would say.
Yeah. That's a good point. I know some of those areas, and you're definitely kind of deep down in those river canyons still, where there isn't a lot of opportunity to get up and get any kind of service.
That's the next question. Wouldn't be nearly as fun if there was cell service, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's very liberating not to have it, other than the fire information side. So that was interesting. That was good planning to be able to have those contacts to keep up a little bit. What was the title of the book you recommended reading? I think that was maybe in reference to when you planned your food out.
Oh yeah, it's called Adventure Ready by Katie Gerber, Gerber.
Okay, and we can try to remember to send that out the
Absolutely.
presentation will be sent out too. So
Yeah.
And then is there a map of the trail specifically?
Yeah, so there's a really well done sort of like overview map that I think Mike Lanza had commissioned that sort of gives you a nice overview of the trail. Other than that, you're mostly kind of relying on like the individual Forest Service maps and whatnot. Something that I've done that I included in my trip report is I added the whole thing in CalTopo. I don't know if you're familiar with that mapping service, but I find it really useful for creating map sheets. And I've overlaid certain things like the National Forest District, so you can talk to the rangers and like see who to get into contact with. So I think we'll try to link some of those resources in the chat, and you can probably dig that map up from my trip report and from Mike's website.
We've got the whole thing on Gaia as well.
Mhm.
And you can download GPX files as well, I think, from Mike's site, and do whatever you want with them, add them to whatever map package you like. But yeah, there's no paper map of the route or anything like that. We're happy to share.
Mm-hmm. Happy to discuss, potential variations and stuff with anyone who wants to talk about that.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see, a couple more. Did you fish along the way? I know I saw one photo in the Selway River. Thoughts on that for carrying, sorry, I'm scrolling here. Less food and being able to augment protein on the hike, tenkara rod, or some other light fishing kit. How often did you camp along water, river straight, lakes, streams, etc.?
Oh man, you'd have to be a better fly fisherman than me to want to rely on that. The fishing wasn't quite as good as we thought it would be. But sometimes you are along the Middle Fork, for days at a time. But there's also times where you go days without seeing any sort of fishable body of water, and I think that'd be bad. I mean, the Middle Fork was like totally blown out unexpectedly when we were there, as was the Selway for part of it. And the fishing basically just goes to almost zero when that happens. So I don't know, with how good modern freeze dry food and stuff is. I don't know how much weight you're saving, if that's worth the risk, but that'd be badass if you did it.
Yeah, we just took our regular fly fishing gear. We did do some fishing. We were exhausted a lot of nights and we were wet, so we didn't do as much as we hoped, but we did some. But it was very, very disappointing, actually.
Yeah.
And then we left them in Stanley. We didn't take them in the Sawtooth, and then we saw all kinds of rising fish in the Sawtooth. So pretty much par for the course, right?
Yeah. And I believe the Selway River, at least the upper Selway, is a catch and release stream also. So it can be really great fishing when it's clear and not blown out, but that would be, at least for the cutthroat, super fun. But if you were hungry, it would really stink to be in a catch and release stream and relying on that. Let's see. And then did you go with trail running shoes or boots, and thoughts on footwear?
We went with these really lightweight Arc'teryx boots. They almost look like high top sneakers. I can't remember what they were called. We destroyed them. We totally tore them up, but that worked pretty well. It's wet, in the northern part, so I'd try to avoid anything Gore-Texy or very heavy. On the other hand, I'm 56. I wouldn't have been comfortable doing it in running shoes. Will did half the thing in Crocs, so but he's 20, he was 22 at the time.
Yeah,
but it's rough. I mean, you can see those trail conditions. It's rough.
Yeah.
I would say don't plan on doing something ultra light that can only be really used on trails, because you're going to be doing some bushwhacking and stepping on rocks and logs and stuff, and anything like too fragile, you might get into trouble.
Good question.
Yep. And then I think you mentioned CalTopo and Gaia both, but the question was, what mapping app did you use for navigation?
Yeah, we use Gaia in the field.
Yeah. We're kind of switching to CalTopo though. They're both good.
I'd say CalTopo is better for planning, but then Gaia is better for like when you're actually out there. But I don't have too much experience with the CalTopo app, so I know people who that works great for them.
Yeah, cool. Let's see. And then Jack Marr says, thanks for the presentation.
Hey, Jack.
It's fantastic. And the question is, it's jumping around on me here. If you were to do one section, not the Sawtooth section, which would you pick?
That Rhoda Creek section up in the so even though there was no trail, it sucked, but it was beautiful. That'd be mine, Will. I mean, the Bighorn Crags are obviously amazing.
Yeah, there's no climbing, Jack, but I think the Selway, there's some really cool. I think you could make like little loops sort of out of part of the section that we did out of like Wilderness Gateway or something like that. And yeah, that area is just so unique, really beautiful.
Yeah.
I'll also mention that we did the very last bit of the Sawtooth, which is in the canyon of the Boise River from Spangle Lake down to Atlanta. I bet no matter how much most people have hiked in the Sawtooth, including us, we never even thought about hiking that before, and it was really, really gorgeous, just beautiful. That's something that this kind of experience, just forces you to experience stuff that you probably wouldn't have experienced any other way.
Let's see. The next question, another map related one, is your, for people who are on Gaia, is your Gaia map public?
If it's not, we'd be very happy to share the map, the route, all the waypoints that we created, lots of waypoints, photos embedded in some of them. We'd absolutely be happy to share that if it's not public now.
Awesome. And we'll make sure and let everybody know in the follow-up email if there's if it is, or we can communicate that way. But yeah, if you're on Gaia, look for that map. Any thoughts on pack rafting sections of the hike instead of hiking?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. You should do it.
Yeah, there's some good pack rafting on that.
I mean, that would be super doable.
Yeah.
I read a trip report recently of someone who did it skiing and pack rafting, did a similar route. They didn't go quite as far as we did, I think, north into the Selway, but it has been done, and you could do it again for sure.
Yeah, you'd have to do it in the other direction, right? You'd have to go south to north, but that Middle Fork section got a little long for me. I wouldn't have minded zipping along in a raft. We were on that section, I think 7 days, Will, doing 15 miles or more a day.
6 or 7. Yeah,
that got a little tedious at the end for me.
Yeah. Let's see. This is a good one. If a beginner backpacker, what would you recommend to start out with? Like which trails along the route to start out with as baby steps?
Well, you could do a traverse of the Sawtooth from like the Alturas Lake area, the Alpine Creek Lakes, north to whatever trail you want to terminate it in, or from Atlanta or wherever. I think through hiking just the Sawtooth is a great experience. If you want to do more than a 2 or 3 night backpack, but less than a 300-mile through hike, that might be a good one.
Yeah. Cool. The next question is about water. Did you have any full days of hiking without finding a water source to replenish your supply?
No, I think we might have if we had stuck with the sort of like official route in that one section through the Selway that we avoided. I think there was like 13 miles without water. That would have been a pretty gnarly bushwhack, so it probably would have been a full day. But in general, no, we had too much water falling out of the sky, and plenty of water on the ground too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that on the ICT, there are sections like that. It's kind of a challenge to find water up on those ridges. And that's probably that 62 ridge section in the Selway where you come off the top down to the river and it's high and dry.
That would have been a tough day.
Yeah, especially if it's hot. Yeah. Let's see. The next question is, any thoughts on, I think, a northbound attempt, or has everyone pretty much done this southbound?
Well, we're the only ones that have done this trail as far as we know. And I think that, northbound would be a great way to do it too. the main reason we chose to do it southbound instead of northbound, because we were concerned about getting into a snowstorm in October. And we knew that it would be a lot easier to bail out of the Sawtooth than it would be to bail out of the Selway-Bitterroot if we did get caught in snow, just because of the, you know, relative size of those wilderness areas. But I think, you know, earlier in the season, almost take your pick. I don't really see a great reason for doing it one direction or the other if you were to do it in like August, September.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you kind of go over some high passes, and the Selway, your only choice would be to bail downriver, which is like one spot. So that wouldn't be that place with no trail would be no fun to get stuck with in a snowstorm.
Definitely not. Yeah, I think if you went too early, there'd be some pretty significant creek crossings up in the, you know, in the Selway. Like if you did it in middle of July, that could be a bit of a concern. That might be one reason to save that part for last and start down south if you did it earlier in the season.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. I mean, I think you've generated some interest judging by the question and answer, and awesome attendance tonight. Just people tuning in. I recognize some names from our trips, and thank you, everybody. And there's some thank yous in the Q&A. You know, just really neat to share this adventure, and this is the great time of year to start dreaming about things to do next summer. So I suspect you'll be getting some emails, maybe some questions as people ponder either sections or the thru hike. And then stay tuned for some ITA trips that focus on the Idaho Wilderness Trail too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks to ITA for setting this up, and everyone for tuning in and all the great answers. And yeah, seriously, I'd be happy to talk about this all day if anyone wants to reach out via phone or email or anything.
Awesome. Well, thanks you guys. Thanks everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.